Let's go to Mike Reviro, joining us via video Skype if you're a PrisonPlanet.tv viewer. If not, he'll be joining you via the audio spectrum for radio listeners. Mike, let's run through the gamut. Break down what you see happening from the latest info, what really happened. If you have a clearer picture, I know it's still somewhat foggy, of what happened to the flotilla yesterday and what this is going to do internationally.
Well, the situation with the flotilla, as you say, it's very murky. Israel has a complete media blackout. People are not being allowed to talk to the prisoners. We don't even have a complete list of the number of the names of the people who've been killed, although the number is now 20. We're being told that died in this situation. We are aware of what happened mostly because of one live video feed that was able to get off the ship while it was being attacked. In that video feed, apparently the Israeli troops that were coming on board were carrying these pre-printed target lists of activists that were supposed to be killed, and we just had a member of the Knesset basically go public saying that Israel wanted to have a lot of deaths as a deterrent to any more of these blockade runners. But the bottom line is this is clearly a violation of international law. When you are a ship at sea, that deck of your ship is the sovereign territory of the nation whose flag you fly. It's like a foreign embassy. When you set foot on the deck of a ship flying the flag of the United States of America, you are setting foot on U.S. territory. When you set foot on the deck of a ship flying the Turkish flag, you are setting foot on Turkish territory. If you do so without the permission of the captain or the government, that is an invasion and an act of war. Now, the bottom line is that Israel's claims that these humanitarian aid ships were filled with weapons is complete nonsense. They had no proof of it whatsoever. The one photo that Israel has put out so far to show the weapons that were found on board the ship, it's basically wooden poles and kitchen knives. And Israel is saying these are weapons because the people of Gaza could use them to attack, Israelis, with these ceramic cooking knives and stuff like this.
Well, that's why they said Hatari had weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction are not handguns, but this isn't even handguns. It's cooking utensils now. So I guess everybody's got to be nuked because now a cooking knife is a weapon of mass destruction.
Apparently, a pointy stick is now reason to start opening fire on the peace activists. And the bottom line is, while the world is outraged, I don't think anybody is surprised because Israel is acting true to form. I mean, robbers will rob, rapists will rape, and Israel commits war crimes. That's been its history. But I think what Americans are really angry about right now, and I'm getting this basically when my wife and I went shopping for groceries yesterday, we were talking to just the ordinary people in the supermarket. They were aware of what was going on. And their attitude was, well, we expect Israel to do this. But they were waiting for the U.S. government to take some kind of decisive action regarding the 9 U.S. citizens who were kidnapped in international waters by this act of war. And now we're seeing, the U.S. once again at the United Nations Security Council is trying to stifle criticism of Israel and is working to protect Israel. And as far as those U.S. citizens in Israeli prisons, apparently they're not important. Now, this is a far cry from 1904, when a businessman named Ion Pertikaris was kidnapped in Morocco by a gentleman by the name of Raisuli, and President Theodore Roosevelt sent 7 battleships with orders to invade Morocco if Pertikaris was not ultimately returned, which he was. And I think the American people are wondering whose side is the federal government on when, this week we're coming up again on the anniversary of the attack on the USS Liberty, where Israel killed all these American sailors, and then President Johnson not only did not hold Israel to account, but participated in this cover-up of saying, oh, it's just an accident and so forth and so on. And we're seeing a repeat of that sellout once again. And at this point, and I've been saying this entire election season, America needs leaders who are going to put America first, second, and third, and a government cannot serve 2 masters. If we have a government that is serving Israel, they cannot serve the best interests of the American people. And you only need to look around at our crumbling infrastructure and our destroyed economy and all the other evils that have descended upon the United States of America under the guidance of a government that is still sending money to Israel, even though the British press just published documents proving that Israel is not only a nuclear power, they've been trying to sell nuclear warheads to regimes like apartheid South Africa. And billions of dollars of our tax money continue to pour into Israel. even though it's illegal to do so under U.S. law because of those nuclear weapons. And the American people are starting to say, okay, whose side is the government on?
Well, let me ask this question. I mean, the situation with all these countries threatening potential war with Israel, namely Turkey. Turkey says they're going to dispatch warships with the next flotilla that's set to leave in the next day or so. I mean, is Israel going to attack Turkish warships?
I think they very well might. I mean, culturally and nationally, Israel is never able to back down. They're never ever able to admit error. If they let this next flotilla through to Gaza and nothing bad happens because of it, then Israel is going to be seen for having been wrong to have imposed such a blockade for the last going on 4 years, in defiance of a UN resolution, I might add. The United Nations has repeatedly, including the Security Council, called on Israel to lift the blockade. Israel refuses to do so. And so I think that, yes, if Turkey sends armed warships to escort the aid fleet, there may be a shooting war between Israel and Turkey. And I want to point out one more thing. Turkey is a member of NATO. Yes, so is Israel. But Israel has attacked a NATO nation over this last weekend. And under the rules of the NATO treaty, an attack on one NATO nation is an attack on them all. So every member of NATO has been attacked by Israel under the terms of that contract. I am waiting for the NATO nations, in particular the United States of America, to stand up and say, you are not allowed to attack NATO.
Now, going back here, Mike, I do think, though, there's spin on both sides, because you have the pro-Gaza group on the news saying we didn't fight back in any way. And then it's not true that we were beating people with poles and trying to stab them. But there are images of people running around with knives, and there are images of people beating the commandos on the head with poles. And it does, at least at those points, look like the Israelis are being restrained while they're being attacked with poles. I agree. It's wrong to attack the ships. I mean, it's wrong to take them over. It's wrong to have the blockade to stop them. My issue is, though, I think the Arabs lose some credibility here when their media puts out that nobody was attacking the commandos, when their own live feeds show it clear as day.
Okay, well, I think we're dealing with a problem with the translation, because what the Arab media is saying, Israel claimed that the people on board the aid fleets attacked first, that the commandos just set foot on the deck and they weren't doing anything bad, and then the crew of the ship just attacked them. Now, in my point of view, they were justified in attacking the invading force at that point anyway. What the Arab media is saying is that it wasn't until the Israelis started firing first, that's when the sticks and poles and knives got picked up, and the melee basically got
underway. All right, stay there. We got a break. Let's come back and cover all that on the other side with Mike Reviro. Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. PrisonPlanet.tv.